we will give a few of these colleges till about 3 or 5 after.
Okay.
They hop on. One more from our team. Hello, Samantha. For your
How's it
ears
going?
burning. I was just saying good things about you.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you for saying good things about me.
Just talking with Richmond that their sensors are up and operational, and we'll probably be showing them something tomorrow.
I will absolutely be showing them something tomorrow. Yeah, I'm super excited to show you. I'm going to show you some inside baseball, some back end stuff so you can see that they're reporting in.
It's great.
Look forward to it.
So
Awesome.
are we.
Great. It's like we've got some other Virginia folks jumping on. That's awesome. Okay, we're just going to give a few minutes. Hopefully we'll have about 10 people joining this, maybe 15, and we'll have a couple colleges represented today.
Okay.
Brendan, can you hear and see us?
And thanks. Let's see here. Here I am.
Awesome.
Oh, open the old laptop.
Oh,
How you doing?
good. Good to see you again.
Hi, Paul. Good to talk to you again.
Brandon, good to see you as well. How you been?
Been busy, but getting back into the swing of things.
Yeah, yeah. I know the feeling. A lot of plates in the air.
Does it seem to you that it's worse since COVID? Like we lost our conditioning or something?
Yeah, I know. I think we're just out of the groove or something. We got to find it again. Yeah.
Right.
But it's a little bit different than it was pre-COVID. I think that's part of it too, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was excited to hear your name come up when we were talking to Elliot.
Oh, good deal. Appreciate that.
Filled us in a little on what you're doing.
Yep. Yep.
Jane said, Jane Stewart, I don't know if you've met her. She's in our sustainability group. She made the comment that, well, just once we would like to do something before you are dead.
Yeah, just tell her we're all in this together. We'll all just pull resources together and gather information from you guys and all over the place. I think at the end of the day, we just all lean on each other, and I think it's all for the betterment for all of us. So whatever we can do, we're glad to help, and we wouldn't hesitate a second to learn from anybody else and you guys. So I think it's great to collaborate like this.
Sure, it's a whole different feeling than you would have in industry where we'd be trying to hide our trade secrets.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. We'll got a few colleges. I'll give a few more minutes, but just on that, I appreciate that having peers on this call is so nice. Paul and I were on a call with another college a few days ago and ended up sharing best practices of stuff completely unrelated to what we're doing, but getting into sub-metering buildings and the pitfalls of that. So I always appreciate these wider conversations.
Yep. Kind of like when you go to a conference, you get 50% information from the conference itself, and the other 50% is just from peers and sitting around the table and talking through things and learning from each other. I get just as much, maybe even a little more sometimes from having conversations like that.
Awesome. All right, well, hopefully a few more people will trickle in, but we'll get started. Like I said, several colleges are waiting on the recording just from timing of this. So I appreciate all of you joining, and hopefully we can have some good conversation at the end of this as well. So I've spoken to most of you before. I think all of you before. You know who I am, and I'm excited to just be speaking with you today. because we've been working on this problem for over a year. And some of the people here are some of the first people I spoke to about how their campus was confronting the challenge of automating their BAS to match the changing dynamics of a campus during a pandemic. So to me, speaking with all of you shows that this is a common problem across the country. We have representation of people interested in this from the Pacific Northwest to Texas and then up to New England. Thank you, Williams College, for being here. So over the past year, we've interviewed dozens of facility leaders in higher ed and know that matching HVAC to actual usage is a common need, but it requires time and technology that many do not have. And if you have the expertise and the technology, it can quickly explode into something well beyond what you have the staff and the resources for. So I brought in Paul Lozo. He's the director of facilities at the University of Richmond because he recognized the critical need for this work and has had success in doing it manually. And we are now working with them to help automate that work. So just quickly, so everyone knows what to expect, I'm going to be asking Paul and Matt a few general questions. So if you think of something, drop it into the chat. But at the end, we'll allow hopefully 20 minutes or more for a little bit wider discussion on best practices. And like I was just saying, I've facilitated a few discussions between facilities and sustainability leaders. We always come away with some good insights. So I'd like you all here because reach out to each of you. Your campus has been recognized as a leader in facilities management or sustainability initiatives. So I'm sure that everyone has at least one best practice that would benefit one of the peers on this call. And as I mentioned, we're recording this. We'll share it back with you in case you want to share it with your team more widely. And we'll be sending it to a few other interested colleges that couldn't be here today. So I don't intend to make everybody introduce themselves, but if there's an interest in connecting after the fact, let me know and I can help share emails, pass those things along. But if you want to share where your campus is located and kind of the climate, because that's such an effect on our automated systems, that's appreciated. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests from the University of Richmond. And first off is Paul Lozo. As I said, Paul's the Director of Facilities Operations at UR, and I'm happy he could join us because he's at the forefront of implementing this first phase of a solution by manually inputting the data from the room reservation system into the building automation system. And through this weekly exercise, UR realizes energy savings and reduces the wear and tear on machines. And just personally, all of us at SRT have very much enjoyed working with UR because they've been inputting this manually, and we're here to help them do that through an automation. We're piloting with them currently, so if you have questions about that, we can get into it, but I really want this discussion to focus on what they're already doing manually, because that data transfer is the best way of determining the effects of tightening the windows of comfort settings on the campus. I'd like to also introduce Matt Long. He's the manager of energy management and controls. And he handles the BAS on a day-to-day basis, and his Friday project is manually entering this data. So I'm really glad he could join us because he knows the pitfalls and benefits associated with such a project. So thank you both for joining us today. Now, let's get to it. I've shared a few of these questions with Paul and Matt, so I'll just ask the first one off the bat. Your teams have been manually aligning your HVAC with your schedules for a few years now. Can you just give us a better overview of what you're doing on your campus?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it. So what we've been doing over the last, many years is we work very closely with our events office and our registrar's office. And they, as they take reservations, they utilize the EMS system. And so as they take in the reservations, it goes into basically a big spreadsheet, which actually gets forwarded to Matt and his team on Fridays. And because we have no way to integrate the reservation system, whether it's a classroom or a conference room or a boardroom, with our BAS system, it requires Matt and his team on Fridays to spend countless hours of going through every single reservation for the following 7 days and making sure that the automation system correlates with the registration system. And as you can imagine, it's data entry by humans. It's painstakingly boring. I'll let Matt speak to that in a minute, but you always run the risk of human error. So it's been sort of in our minds for a long time that we need to come up with a way to be able to integrate the two so that when somebody makes a reservation, it automatically, connects and communicates with our building automation system. And depending on the parameters that we set up, whether it's 15 minutes prior to the meeting or 30 minutes prior to the start time of the event, I should say, that the system will automatically go into occupied status and adjust the set points and so forth. So that's one big piece of it, and that's a huge piece. And a lot of what we learned in the past was that it was going to be painstakingly difficult to integrate these systems, and there's going to be a large expense with it. So that has been a little bit of a deterrent, although not enough that we knew we weren't going to eventually go down this path. But it was probably a little bit of a deterrent that we sort of kicked it down the curb for a little bit until we started the conversation with Elliot and the SRT Labs team. So that's a big component of it. And then the other piece of it, we knew that if we were able to integrate and make these connections between the two systems, that we could probably, or not even probably, we knew that we could really enhance our energy management system, because as you know, you get a lot of folks that will make reservations, whether it's a student organization or faculty member or things like that, and their plans change, their reservations change, their time changes. So if you had taken a student organization that decides they're going to make a reservation on a Thursday night in a particular room from 6 p.m. and it might be at the last minute, and this is where the other challenge comes in, 6 to 8 p.m. If they make that reservation at 4:30 or 5, that data currently has to quickly get over to Matt and his team to make sure that we don't go into unoccupied status for that location in that particular building, and he has to make sure that the room stays comfortable. So we're hoping to sort of to help with that little bit of a disconnect as well. But and as you know, a lot of times they reserve these rooms and A, don't show up, or B, the meeting doesn't last but half the time. So if we don't know that, which typically we don't know if they don't show up, and we don't know if they left half the time, and the automation system is set to condition that space for that period of time, where that's just energy consumption that's not needed. So we're sort of able to connect the dots with our energy management, our energy conservation plans too, in terms of sustainability. So this is kind of it's a pilot program. It's going really well. Obviously, SRT folks have been fantastic to work with. So at the end of the day, we're really hoping that this plan or this integration, just rewards us in many ways. And if by having these sensors in the room, if the room empties out an hour before the end of the reservation time, these sensors, the idea behind this for the energy conservation piece is there's no movement in the room. This meeting has left the space, and the automation system is just going to ramp down and go back into unoccupied status. So there's a human piece programming, and then there's the sustainability and the energy conservation piece on the other side of things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's get a little bit more specific. Maybe this is a question going off of that, but going to what specific pieces are you pulling together? What systems are you connecting and messaging between?
So the EMS system, which is our university-wide reservation system, that's one key component, and we don't manage that out of this office. That's managed. The registrar uses a piece of it. Our events and conferences uses a piece of it. So there's a lot of entities out there that use it. We use it very little, but it's not controlled out of this office. But what our hope is that we get, and I can let Matt piggyback on this on sort of the technical side, but we want EMS to communicate through our FinStack and using our Tritium system that we have, and I'll let Matt kind of chime in a little bit on how that communication we hope works, once we get this integration in place. But
and so currently, like we said, EMS, we get the spreadsheet and then we manually enter it into FinStack, and we have to create special events for whatever reservation comes through. And then that translates down to our Tritium system that broadcasts that schedule out to all of our VAV boxes, central plants, air handlers, fan coil units, pumps, et cetera. So hopefully with this new implementation, like we've already said, when somebody makes that block, it just eliminates that time of having to go through each and every one and schedule all of this stuff.
So Matt, can you get into a little of these nuts and bolts and where others will need to make these decisions? I'm sure it would be good to hear what you think is the best place to start with, and yeah, what are you choosing for set points? It's a great starting point. And
Campus-wide, we pretty much have a standard of 68 for heating and 74 for cooling. Depending on the building and the people housed in those buildings, sometimes we do deviate from that a little bit as the need arises. You know, we do have some areas that sit right on top of our steam tunnels on campus that they're always warmer than the rest of the dorm. So we do have to make exceptions, but for the most part, it's 68 for heat, 74 for cooling. And then when we go to unoccupied mode, we go up to 82 for cooling and down to 62 for heating.
that's awesome. I think that those set points would be common across the campuses here. So can you two give me a little bit of the outcomes of this? The question I always get is this worth it? By manually entering the data, have you noticed a reduction in the wear and tear on the machines? And maybe you could talk a little bit about how we're aiming to quantify the energy savings.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the challenges that we have, we kind of knew this going in, is, you know, we've got very select electric meters on campus. So we've got one basically, I'll call it a house meter, and that has got multiple buildings on this particular meter. So we knew from the energy conservation piece, it was going to be a little bit of a challenge. We weren't really sure how we were going to, you know, get the energy consumption use or reduction by just having that one house meter. So what we decided to do, that we're piloting this program, this integration or implementation on the third floor of one of our buildings that actually is used in multiple ways. It's got some offices, it's got some conference space that's up there. We've got a couple larger rooms that occasionally get used as classrooms. So it's a multi-use floor on this particular building. So we knew this was going to be a sort of a prime candidate for us to be able to gauge energy consumption and where we can actually measure and quantify the savings. So we went ahead and installed a meter. We couldn't quite capture the entire third floor. We've got just because of the distribution panel in that building, we ended up catching a little bit of the second floor, but we think it's minor enough. It's not going to sway our results and how this implementation pilot program is going to work. But we installed the meter so that we can actually measure. We're going to let the meter give us a 30-day benchmark before we start really monitoring how this is going to look. The meter is in place as of last week, so it's creating that baseline for us now as we speak in its current state, in its current, you know, reservation program and its current building set points. We haven't changed a thing. It's this old business that we're measuring right now. So once we go and we pick that sort of initiation date and start the 30-day window where we're going to measure the difference, we'll be able to hopefully at the end of all that is say, you know, here's, and this is just a sliver, it's a needle of what, you know, how impactful this could be if we rolled it out to an entire building or the entire campus. So we're really hoping that we get some quantifiable results from this benchmarking period after we're done with the pilot program entirely. And then at the same time, you know, we're going to be able to gauge, and this is, again, it's a needle in a haystack, but it's quantifiable for us, is we're going to be able to see that integration piece for how many times these spaces on this particular floor were reserved over a 30-day period. And then we'll be able to say, you know, okay, so Matt and his team didn't have to program that floor, and how much time did that save them? And then we can multiply that by, you know, the many, you know, spaces that we have out on campus. So we're measuring kind of two things at once in this. So,
which I can quantify that number for you. That the time that we do spend for the scheduling part of campus roughly averages about 4 hours a week. And then when you take that out, we basically spend 5 weeks of our year individually scheduling all of these spaces. So if that is all automated, that will save us literally 5 weeks of skilled labor going through these schedules.
And I don't think that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that includes any last minute changes
Right.
and things like that, which happens throughout the entire week. So that's just what we know that gets sent to Matt on the, you know, every Friday. And then there's multiple changes as the week goes on that they have to quickly adapt to, so.
And then as far as like the wear and tear, one of the best examples for this is we do have meeting rooms, conference rooms, board rooms across campus that are cooled from other buildings, central plants. It's just the way our campus is designed. And it happened to us a couple weeks ago when it was 80 degrees on the weekend. We had to fire up our 600-ton plant to cool one room that's about 1,500 square feet. And we had no way of knowing, did they leave early? You know, are we still running this plant unloaded and short cycling it just to keep this one room cool when we don't really need to be? So that wear and tear of not having this machine run unloaded all the time just for one space is definitely beneficial.
And I just to add to that a little bit more is when you think about the VAVs and, you know, many, we haven't got kind of a separate project that we have going on is, you know, is collecting the data from all the VAVs and things like that. So we've got, gosh, probably over 2,000 data points so far identified on campus. So we're able to zero in and, you know, at the end of the day, now this is going to be a little bit further down the road because, you know, you want to grab the lowest hanging fruit first, but we're going to be able to go in and, you know, it's this pilot location, for instance, on the 3rd floor of the building, we can be able to compare the runtime of these VAVs pre, you know, pilot program and post-pilot program. So when you start gathering that data, that's another whole set of data that we can get information on to try to figure out, you know, if the life cycle of a VAV is X amount of years, and we can determine how much it's running. And we got to, you know, do we plan on replacing that 3 years ahead of schedule, or are we going to get 3 more years extended life? You know, and so the data points will tell us that. But I think what's more important is now we can, with the success of this pilot program, at the end of the day, what our hope is that we can actually, you know, grab that data and see where our energy consumption savings is, match it to the data that we're gathering from each VAV, for instance, or even air handlers, and then start mirroring the data together to look at our life cycles of the individual units. So there's a multitude of ways that we can see this running for us, but you know, the initial is going to be the energy savings based on the reservation system, and then obviously the integration of the two systems, so we reduce the manpower to program everything. So
Awesome, thank you. So we all know getting a great initiative built is one thing, but getting consensus on rollout across the college campus, something that needs to be planned and managed with the number of groups involved. So can you tell us how it's gone for you so far with both facilities staff, those, you know, doing the work and putting in those hours, and how it's affected the faculty, staff, and students that you're rolling it out to?
So that's a great question. So, you know, initially when we first started talking about this program, and you know, we started to kind of gather the nuts and bolts of what it looks like and what is it going to do for us and who's going to be impacted. So, you know, I just kind of had to sit down and think, okay, you know, obviously the events office is going to be impacted. Our facility staff is impacted. You know, they're going to be impacted on a greater scale later, but primarily engineering services department, which is, you know, falls in line where Matt is in his role, and definitely in Matt's department, of course. But another big key player in this is our IS department, and we know how IS is in IT, which respectfully, you know, they're very protective of any additional systems that want to come and play on campus, and especially when you're talking about having access to gather data and things like that. So you know, there's the whole, you know, gateway issue and things like that. And Matt actually has worked very, very closely with our IS team. But initially, when we started thinking about putting this plan together, and I started to think about all the players, you know, I had to sort of gather them together in an email and say, look, this is what we're thinking from a facility standpoint and our sustainability office. that's another one too, that's a key player. But, you know, I had to start thinking about, you know, what does this look like? What is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to accomplish? Who does it impact? And so once I started thinking that through, I just kind of did this email to all the players in the various departments, explain what we were doing, explain to them that it's a pilot program and what the ultimate goal was, and at the end of the day, and how it benefits us as a university. It's going to benefit the events office, obviously. And really, we just had to really get IS to buy in and allow us to play and allow us to get into the networks and being able to extrapolate that data, you know, like you guys are being SRT is seeing, you know, and from us. And so, and then we had sort of a meeting with you all and sat down with our team. We put together a sort of a kind of a brainstorming session, I guess I'll say. And everybody could see that there was a lot of benefit to this and a lot of, you know, a lot of positive results could come from it. And at the same time, we also understand it's a pilot. So, you know, you roll something like this out campus-wide, it's going to have much more impact on others, you know, much broader range of faculty members and things like that. But I think if we can be successful in implementing this, and we've got a great group that's collaborated together to make this happen, it's going to be an easier sell if we decide to roll this out much larger. And I know, Samantha, I'll call you out on here because I know that, you know, we have our check-in meetings, which we have one tomorrow, and our entire UR team comes together, you and your team come together. And I think that's been super helpful. And Matt really is a key component in connecting you and our IS team together. So I thought it was, to be honest with you, it was going to be a bigger sell and a bigger hurdle for us to get across. But it truly hasn't been. It's been, you know, it's been pretty successful in the short time we rolled it out. So.
And we had internally had to make sure too that, you know, everything was going to work, because we all know what happens here. And even our events office doesn't really know, once they send that schedule out, what we do with it. So seemingly to everybody outside of our building, nobody knows that we're behind the scenes scheduling all this. They just know they show up, the room's comfortable, and they're happy and good to go. So we collectively, and with SRT, had to make sure that all of this is going to work so it doesn't impact them. So they still, you know, have no idea none of this is going on. And we just had to make sure that was going to continue seamlessly.
Yes, heard on many campuses of facilities being the unsung heroes, keeping people, you know, warm, safe, fed, all the things needed for a college campus to run, but never seeing the work behind the scenes. Well, we could chat all day about this. Like I said, we love working with the UR team. But I wanted to carve out a little bit of time at the end. So if anybody has any questions, you know, it's a small group. If you could introduce yourself, ask the question, whether it's for the U of R team or for the SRT team. We've got people from both sides on. So if there's any questions, love to chat through them now.
So, Paul, this is Brendan. What were some of the, as far as the systems architecture, what were some of the prerequisites that need to be in place? Yeah, we're probably all pretty similar. We've got one or more BAS systems. Elliot is connecting those somehow to the cloud with all their magic behind the scenes and manipulating what I assume are your backnet points on the end where you're turning the equipment off and on. Are there any essential elements in there that a campus might not have in place yet that we'd have to think about?
That's a great question, Brandon. I'll actually defer to Matt on that one. He's the one that's in the weeds.
Honestly, not particularly. The biggest hurdle is to make sure your IT, your IS department is on board with what's going on and that they understand exactly what you're trying to do. Kind of explaining to them ahead of time what this is going to do and what exactly you're accomplishing helps. But your existing system in place is good. There's nothing we had to add. It's really just been the IT hurdle, allowing them to kind of take that barrier down and let somebody else in from outside.
Yeah, and I think we also had, and Samantha, I think you worked closely with Crystal on this in our events office, right? I think there was a little bit of a hurdle with EMS, I think, trying to make that connection with EMS. And I don't remember ultimately how it landed, because I know you two, I was reading the emails between y'all communicating, but I think that was actually a hurdle as well, right, at the very beginning?
Yeah, Elliot, do you want to take this one or?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first pieces of this is just confirming the licensing that's available. So for just the API endpoints, however many are available on the license, was something with EMS that we want to make sure, since University of Richmond was piloting this program for us, that they didn't have any charge to it. So we went over to EMS to confirm that they would give this project a free license so that we could connect without taking up one of the endpoints already in use by the University of Richmond. So that was one of the pieces. As a leader in this, we wanted to make sure that we were working closely with Accruit, the owner of EMS, and on the BAS side, working with Siemens to make sure that we had the support from those third-party vendors, that they understood what we were doing and how we could help their product, so that we actually had quick buy-in from both of those groups when they saw the advantages of having that network connection. Any other questions? Anything we could talk about with what we're doing with SRT, or what U of R's best practices are?
I guess this is another specific question, Paul. Are you integrating with occupancy sensors that were pre-existing? Are you adding some occupancy sensors in this pilot, or?
Yeah, actually, the occupancy sensors were supplied by SRT, and we just installed those. Was it Tuesday, yesterday? Or no, it was Monday. Wasn't it, Elliot? You were on campus?
Yep. Monday morning, I was on campus with you.
Yep. So we installed we identified 7 locations on that building. I can't remember the specs of the occupancy sensors, but I mean, you installed those 7 in what, an hour and a half, and it was pretty quick.
Oh yeah, the hardest part was finding the ladder.
Right.
Once we got rolling, big thanks to Mac for that. They're quick and easy. They're just infrared. One of the pieces that is super important to us is keeping up all of the data anonymous. We don't care who is in the room, just that someone is in the room. So layering in with the room reservation, occupancy sensors in all those places, like drop-in study carrels or conference rooms that students might just open the door and use, trying to capture all of the dynamic changes on the campus that aren't reserved through the system. So we look at deploying occupancy sensors where needed, but in Richmond's case, I'm putting up a few occupancy sensors around and noticing that they have the lighting control. So we always look for any occupancy sensors on site. If they're already present controlling the lights, can we tap into that system and control all those rooms as well without installing anything extra?
And we have a lot of the lighting occupancy sensors on campus. We have many of them. I mean, we still have spaces where they could be installed. In fact, Elliot, in the rooms you were in, do you remember? Because I don't know off the top of my head, were there lighting sensors in all of the rooms that you were in? Did you notice?
They weren't in all of the rooms. We had overlap of, I think, 3 rooms that had a working lighting sensor in there.
Okay, good.
But they are
So
around
for
your
me-
campus. I peeked around a
What's
little
that?
bit, and you have lots of them.
Yeah, we have lots of them. But for me, and we of course we'll see what the results will be at the end of the pilot program. But I think that it would be really beneficial, knowing that there was 3 overlap, to put the lighting sensors in the other 4 locations, because that's part of the energy consumption as well. I mean, somebody might leave a room early and not turn the light out. So sure, we got the sensor that you installed that's going to tell us, from the building automation system, but the lights might still be burning. So, that's actually something I'm going to make a note of now, because I'll probably get our electricians to go put the sensors in those 4 locations so that we can really maximize the consumption.
Oh, this is Ken Jensen from Williams. After you go through the pilot program and decide, what savings and things you do, how are you going to quantify that, and what will you use that particular information to sell to the board or whoever to fund the project to make it campus-wide?
Great question. So what I think I'll do, and I haven't I haven't fully vetted my thought yet, but my plan is to hopefully be able to quantify this data to be able to tell the story. And so what I'll end up doing is, as I'll gather the use of the rooms, my plan is to gather the air handlers that are feeding the floor, the number of VAVs, the square footage, and basically take all of that information to be able to figure out exactly where my savings are, and how much, and be able to quantify it, tell the story. And then I think what my next plan will be is to be able to find a building that is very similar in the number of devices per square foot. So in other words, if I've got 10 VAVs on this particular third floor and it's X amount of square feet, where can I take a building that's got 3 times that square footage and 3 times those VAVs? So I'll just try to sort of blow this pilot program up into a full entire building, with the only difference that's very similar to the way it operates, but the only difference will be I would like a little bit more mix in a full building. So I will then pull in a building that's got a number of faculty offices and more classrooms, and try to change the use of the building. And I think if I can do that and I can sell what the savings will be, my plan then will be to bring our director of sustainability is already involved, but we have a green revolving fund that we work together closely with him on. And so I will try to fund an entire building of this through the green revolving fund and show an ROI within 5 to 7 years. And if I can do that, it's a much easier sell, and it's money that, as part of the green revolving fund committee, if you will, we can easily pull money out and fund the building. Now, to your question though, Kenneth, if I were to say now I've gone to a building and here's the ROI and this really proves valuable, I could probably still use the green revolving fund, but I'm going to need more funds in that green revolving fund, which will then go to the administration and try to beef up the green revolving fund. Because if I can show payback, it's much easier to get the money to be, dump more money in the green revolving fund. So that's kind of my quick thought where I'm headed now, is just to blow this up to one building after this.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
You're welcome.
And one of the things that I know I'm banking on, and I think everybody else is as well, we do have student organizations, professors that schedule some of these rooms out. And instead of giving us a time slot, they'll just say, I want it for 24 hours a day. That way nobody else can take it. And we have to try and run down the professor or the organization that made the reservation and let them know, hey, you scheduled this for 24 hours. When are you actually trying to use this space? And I would say it's a 50-50 chance of us actually hearing back or actually getting in touch with someone. So you just kind of have to schedule it, because most of the time when that happens, it's Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays. And so on Friday afternoon, when you're trying to get in touch with people, they don't really respond back to us. So we just have to make the reservation for 24 hours and let it go. So with these occupancy sensors, we'll be able to say, okay, you're occupied, and let the sensors do its thing. And when it goes unoccupied, it's going to kick itself off. So we'll see the return on investment big time on those cases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep, great point.
Hi, I'm Jane. I work with Brendan at Washington and Lee, and I am curious if you are looking at applying any protocols so that the system will not come on even if the occupancy sensor detects somebody there. So in other words, if you want to be able to, we have some buildings where we're trying to just discourage people from using them, and we don't necessarily want to use the energy just because somebody happens to decide to use a room. Have you been looking at it from that angle?
Actually, I'll defer to Matt on that. That's actually a great question. And yes, if we're not, yes, we will, but I'll let Matt answer that one. That's a great
So
question.
we do have spaces where we're trying to leave them unoccupied, and discourage folks from going in. So that will be written into this occupancy, even if the sensor picks it up, it's not going to occupy itself. There are certain spaces that are kind of heavily trafficked areas that I don't want them to go occupied for half hour, however long, just if they see occupancy for a split second kind of thing. So that will definitely be implemented throughout our plans.
Yeah, that's a great question.
And we've worked with other universities looking at swaths of time from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. They don't care if you're in there studying, we're not turning on the system for you. So putting those blocks of time in there that have an override of the occupancy sensors, as well as shutting down areas of campus if they are trying, for curtailment periods, all the students are going home, the dormitory shouldn't be occupied, just shutting those buildings off so that you can maximize those curtailment periods.
Yep.
Even if they come back from that laptop charger, it doesn't kick on.
Right. And we have a case that where, we have some professors that love to be in here on Saturday and Sundays. Well, you take a building with 30,000 square feet and there's 2 professors in it and they're calling and saying, oh, I'm in here on Saturday at 4 and I'm freezing. Well, you're one of 2 people that's in there, and I don't think they quite understand to turn the system on to cool them or heat them while they're in that building, for that length of time. So, that's a challenge because they want the system on, they want to be comfortable, but at the same time, we're not interested in firing up a chiller plant or something for the one building for 2 people, so we have to navigate that. And where it's going to get a little bit trickier for us is, I think, when we start to, if and when we start to roll this out into a building that's got a heavy faculty use in terms of their offices and things like that. That's going to be a little bit more challenging, I think, for us. But we have to. We'll. I think we can get through that. We just got to sort of think through how we're gonna communicate that to the departments. But.
And that issue gets compounded even more because a lot of our buildings are older buildings, and we're still running 2-pipe systems on a lot of our buildings throughout campus. So. If we get a spike in temperature here, like we have been recently, the professor comes in, it's 80 degrees outside, the building's warm, the building's unoccupied, and then we get emails and phone calls and everything on Mondays. So it's going to be partially that and partially the mindset of having to retrain faculty and students that this is how this system works, and the education of them is going to, that's one of my initiatives now, is to re-educate everybody on campus how this actually works, instead of them just thinking it's like at home, you go flip your thermostat on to cool or heat and let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's one of the things that we help universities work with, is the marketing to especially faculty of, this is a greater sustainability effort, and rolling out that this is a big change. It's an organizational shift, and that being a part of it is good for the greater good. I know we have one faculty hiding right now on this call, ex-faculty, that we run things by to make sure that she agrees with them. But we do, we have many ex-faculty on our staff. It's one thing that we are very conscious of, and want to make sure that as these great initiatives are moving forward, that we don't have pitfalls and just we communicated the outcomes wrong. So we work with universities to make sure that those things are covered. Thanks, Carolyn, for letting me call you out.
So Paul, assuming this pilot is a success, have you thought of other use cases where this platform may come into play?
Well,
Additional value.
what's that? I'm sorry, Brendan.
Other ways this may have additional value. I mean, our initial conversations with Elliot, he was naming numerous use cases having to do with adjusting custodial schedules and and the like.
Yep. Yeah, there's the custodial schedules is a big one. We've had that conversation here as well. You know, and then we talked about, you know, having the occupancy sensors, we have the lighting sensors, but another sort of peeve of mine is windows. You know, you go into a classroom that's empty and you know, it's 90 degrees outside, AC is on in the classroom and 6 windows are open. You know, you think about it, you know, and I haven't got my brain wrapped around this yet, but I can think of, you know, staying in a hotel, you know, especially if you're at the beach, you open the sliding glass door to the balcony, AC kicks off, you know, because they don't want that to be on while you're sitting there listening to the ocean. So, you know, I don't think this would probably go over really well, but I would love to think about having some sort of sensors even on the windows. And you know, you leave the windows open for a period of time, and that sensor knows that, you know, it's the ambient temperature is this, the set point is this in the building, obviously, because we you know, they're not going to match, and so I want to be able to. I don't know if it would necessarily regulate the system, but I would love for it to come into an alarm, maybe down in our controls office or something like that, because, you know, it probably would, you know, maybe not the schools up in the Northeast, but down here in the South, you know, we deal a lot with the mold and mildew, you know, complaints that we get a lot of times, right? And it's always because, you know, not always, but in so many cases are because, you know, the inside temperature is set at 74 and we've got 95 degrees high humidity. You know, you go to look at the complaint in the room and, you know, you've got a half a dozen windows open. Well, you know, there's the culprit, you know, it's and so I would love to think about how we can somehow put some sort of sensor in the windows that just sends an alarm down to the controls that you know, alerts us to be able to go and deal with it. Not necessarily cut the system off, because obviously you don't want to do that if they're in the middle of teaching a class and things like that. That's not going to go over well either. So, and then you're right, there's the custodial schedules and things like that. And the other thing too is you got to think about common areas in the building. So if we don't, and it's all going to be a programming piece, but you know, if you've got security walking through a building at 2 o'clock in the morning, we don't want the occupancy center to pick up somebody in the hallway either. And all of a sudden, you know, you're trying to condition the space as if it was occupied. So we got to sort of think through that. I think a little bit of it's going to be working with our police department and kind of getting a general understanding of how their security guards work at night in and around the buildings and things like that, to make sure we don't have a conflict of what we're trying to accomplish. So.
Yeah,
This is
it's
Kenny again. In all our newer buildings, we've put in window sensors just for those purposes.
You say you've done that in the newer buildings?
Yeah, in our newer buildings, we have a couple in older buildings that we've used wireless that are driven by the sun, just for that reason, because in the wintertime, people open their windows to get fresh air. So we shut the heat off until it, you know, if it gets down to a certain degree, we turn it on. So there's no freezing. And conversely, when the air conditioning is on, we shut the air conditioning off in the room if the window's open. So, and it doesn't come back on unless it gets cold in there, but it works very well. It saves us a lot of energy.
What type of buildings do you have them in?
We have them in our science building. The newest one is more of a classroom building than it is a research building. So we have them all through there. We have them in a smaller building that's a administrative building that's offices. We use them all over the place. We've put it into our standard that's, you know, if we're gonna do a building, that it's gonna have the sensors on either wired or the wireless ones put in the building. So we've been trying to find a sash that would have them built in that we could wire from, so that we, you know, new windows would be pre-done, but we haven't found that yet. So it works very well.
Interesting. That's good information. I'm glad to hear that. We don't have any on campus, but that's another piece of where I would like to go eventually. So I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
I'd like to implement them in our dorm rooms. We actually had a case this winter. We got a cold blast, and cold for us anyway. And we had one of our international students in the building. And she called in and said she was cold, and I pulled everything up, and we had some of our guys on site doing some other things. And her entire floor was cold. It was down to 40 degrees. And they went over there, and all the rooms around hers, they had left the windows open when they went home for winter break, and it was just freezing the building out.
That's the kind of stuff we do. I don't mean to pitch too much, but looking at the way we just add intelligence on top of sensors. So whether that's ambient temperature and looking at the difference between inside the building and the external temp based on the weather station, and sending those notifications to your team. But we also look at it in the same space as water. So looking at smart sensors and water consumption, just the way we're looking at energy. So if there's no occupancy in the building, but the water is running, let's turn it off. Let's notify your team. So once we're in place, finding all these extra use cases of understanding how buildings work in relation to how the occupancy is changing within them is where we kind of came to this product at a good time for us, as hybrid learning and virtual workplaces have come into the norm, and buildings just aren't being used the way they were intended when they were built. So helping older buildings, we like to say the mission control center of the campus, so that you can see all of these sensors and systems in one place and have them automate actions, even if that action is just notifying the team that, hey, this floor is 40 degrees. We should change something here. Something's going wrong.
And to that point, on the flip of that, with our, going through COVID and how that has all happened, I'm sure a lot of y'all have run into the fact of faculty saying, well, are we purging all the air out? Are we changing the air around enough? Are we filtering it enough? And having these sensors in place will allow us to not only keep our purge modes there, but as we occupy the space, we can more closely monitor how many people have been in and out, and open up the outdoor air more to get some more fresh air based on how many people are there and how many times the rooms are being used. And currently, I don't have that information. I can't see, has it been occupied for 30 minutes or has it been occupied all day? And do we need to put some more fresh air into the space?
Yeah, that's another great point.
I have a question. Willie here up at Williams College. How does the integration work with your faculty says that they want to schedule a room? How does that translate to the BMS? Like, how does that schedule change, get interacted? Somebody's inputting that, right?
Yeah, correct. So what they do is they go online and they make the schedule, and then that goes to our events office, and then it gets put into that spreadsheet. And then that spreadsheet I get once a week, and then I manually enter in anything that's out of our normal schedule operating hours. I enter in special events on the building management system. And then after that Friday, I get emails, a handful on the daily, of different events that have been scheduled. And as they come through, I'll put them in if they need to be special events, or if they fall into the normal operating time, they just get put in a folder because I don't need to change anything. But any special events come basically through me.
Thank you.
We're just looking to take that off his plate. Let's make his life easier. In our dream world, the professor goes in, books the time, and then all those pieces along the way are automated. So Matt will just be.
I guess, Elliot, that was my question. So the professor books the time, right? How does that get manipulated in the BMS?
So when they make, go ahead, Elliot, go ahead.
I'm not the most technical person on this, but we're pulling in the data from the EMS system, for Richmond's case, processing it through the M1 platform, in the right situation, confirm or denying with an occupancy sensor, and then adjusting the set points in the BMS. If you need a more technical explanation than that, I am not here.
No, I got it.
Are you doing the actual adjustment of the set points, or is that kind of a pre-setting in the BMS in the automation system?
You mean as far as like temperature set points?
Right. And do you have an occupied set point, standby, unoccupied?
Yeah, all of that is preset. The only thing that we're adjusting currently when that stuff comes through to us is occupied, unoccupied modes.
Okay, so it's a pretty light lift as far as the integration then.
Yeah, you're just looking for that occupied, unoccupied, not really changing the set points itself. Our current VAS software already has that, and it flip-flops that based on that status.
Ellen, I saw you on mute for a second, so I'm gonna call you up. Did you want to add anything to that?
I thought your non-technical explanation was exactly on par.
Why? Thank you.
Basically, we do get read-write access to the BAS, and we usually just have read-only access from the EMS, whatever your room reservation system is, if that helps it at all. And then we're pushing those over, and we're just serving as the translator in between, and sort of exactly being an automated Matt Long for University of Richmond.
Awesome. Are there any last questions? Also, we'll close this out. All right. Well, first off, huge thank you to University of Richmond for talking through this, and thank all of you for joining us today. I hope everybody walks away today that this is worth doing and that there's savings that you can find, and it's technically feasible, and it wasn't previously. So working through these integrations and automations is what we do, and whether that's layering in Windows sensors or water sensors, we can help become the mission control center. So we're working with U of R on all this, and we'll keep everybody updated on how that's going. If you want any conversations facilitated, I can connect you. I think a lot of you know each other. I see a lot of Virginia schools on this call, but I can help with that, and I'll just keep you all updated with how we're doing at the University of Richmond. And I'll follow this up, like I said, I'll send you this recording and a brief description of it in case you want to share it with your wider team.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, everybody. We've enjoyed it, and use us as a resource. Anything we can do to help, we're easily accessible, and we'll be glad to help any way we can as we sort of navigate and blaze this trail, and you know, we learn as we go along and share the positives and the negatives. So we're glad to help any way we can. Thanks, everybody.
And Elliot, you've got my contacts if you want to share it with everybody. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me and ask any questions that they think of later, feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.